In 1979, Don Coscarelli, working with amateurs funded locally in an entirely do-it-yourself piecemeal fashion, serving as director, editor, and cameraman, filming on weekends with mostly friends and musicians, somehow created the mind-bending dreamlike cult classic Phantasm, introducing the world to the dark and malevolent entity known as the Tall Man and his uniquely crafted and mysterious mythology. On an estimated budget of $300,000, the film was an instant hit, went on to gross over $11 million at the box office, and remains to this day a timeless cult classic, one whose influence and effect arguably due to the development of later films, especially Oblivion, and its use of cutscenes from the original, as well as the growth of the entire franchise, the growth of horror in general, and the overuse of the jump scare tactic, is more powerful today than it has ever been. A new film was released in 2016, yet another final installation and final battle within the series, although this time I do believe them, as Angus Scrimm is dead, and the rest of the crew are getting a bit old to portray these characters, and the ending did feel somewhat complete. This showcases how popular these films have remained throughout the decades, as this is the only horror series to follow the original plot with the original characters from beginning to end since 1979. Texas Chainsaw Massacre has existed longer, but it is not the original plot with the original characters. There has been countless changes to the canon and remakes. Phantasm exists as a singular, pure and well-developed original entity within the genre. What Coscarelli managed to create is an almost Lynchian-esque take on adolescent development. Fear of loss, fear of mortality, and fear of the dark and mysterious occult nature of reality, while we seemingly and without warning slide in and out of dreams, or one massive dream. Mike Pearson, while nosing around the local mausoleum and cemetery, witnesses the mortician. An extremely creepy and tall man lift a casket that was well over 500 pounds. From here, Mike plays detective and action hero, rallying his brother Jody and their friend Ice Cream Man Reggie to hunt down and destroy this dark and malevolent entity, who they discover is harvesting the bodies of the living and the dead, and turning them into little dwarf creatures for unknown and only slightly explained reasons. Along the way, they do battle with the caretaker with a hat, the tall man's hooded dwarves, as well as the iconic silver sphere. They manage to definitively kill the tall man, although that proves completely ineffective when he returns shortly after. In a twist of an ending, it is revealed that everything has been a dream. Jody died before the movie began, and Reggie and Mike make plans to take a road trip to lift his confused and saddened state. It is then that the tall man is revealed to be a true manifestation, not a creation of Mike's imagination. This is followed by one of the all-time great jump scares, ending the film.
Remember, we can never trust the things that we see, because nothing is ever as it seems.
We will get into detail on why this film is one of the best films in horror history, as well as one of the most long-lasting and impacting in a list of its top 13 features. Before we do, please hit that like and subscribe, as it is truly the only way for my channel to grow. And without any further ado, here is the top 13 reasons, things, scenes, characters, aspects, or whatevers that define Phantasm as a genre classic. Coming in at 13, we have the ominous and creepy tone that starts the movie. The opening tone is one ominous sound, rising and lowering in pitch. It perfectly sets the stage for the nature and feel of the film, while the sound of the giant tuning fork gateway is genuinely creepy, and seems to ring out whenever they are in the mausoleum and there is a silence, like a low hum. Almost similar to tinnitus if one has experienced the phenomenon, ever present in your mind, but only really discernible when you are presented with moments of silence. Coming in at 12, we have the hand monster. The hand monster is quite cheesy and fun. It is a scary concept that when amputated, the tall man's appendages will continue to attack, and eventually turn into strange flying bug monsters. After Mike cuts off the tall man's fingers and places them in a box, this is what happens. The scene becomes quite hilarious as Mike and Jody attempt to subdue the beast and annihilate it in the garbage disposal. Coming in at 11, we have Jody. Played by Bill Thornberry, Jody is great. He pulls off his lines well, plays his song well, backs Mike up well, and deserves a number on the list for his action scenes in the car alone. It is he who shoots the sphere, saving Mike and destroying the tall man's most unique weapon. He returns in later films, but I think this is his best and most well-written appearance in a Phantasm film. At 10, we have the dwarves. The dwarves are one of the creepiest elements of the film. They resemble a trope of design that many creatures inhabit throughout history, a dark and mysterious beast hidden by a robe. Of course, the Jawas from Star Wars come to mind, and preceded Phantasm by 2 years, but Coscarelli states he had already had the idea and ordered the costumes, And when you analyze the timeline, this does seem accurate. And even if Coscarelli did draw inspiration from the Jawas, the dwarves of Phantasm are of an entirely different nature and design, and their design has been copied or even preceded by various other cultural tulpas many times. The darker aliens and the alien abduction phenomenon, most specifically those portrayed in Communion, are very similar. In my opinion, these creatures, and creatures similar, have inhabited the consciousness of humans long before we began categorizing them and naming them as aliens, demons, angels, and otherwise. The dwarves in Coscarelli's vision are unique in creation and behavior, and fundamental to the development of the plotline. These creatures are the remnants of the tall man's human victims, crushed down in size in small vats to survive the bitter atmosphere and temperatures of the Red Planet, where they, in this movie, toil as slaves for the development of the tall man's agenda, of which we really don't get a great deal of explanation, and that is for the best. It is these beasts that serve as the main arm of the tall man's army, carrying out his smaller tasks and deviations. They are a very well created and executed aspect of the Phantasm mythos, one whose image and design lives on, defining the movie as well as the entire series, almost as impactful, iconic, and series-defining as the spheres, or even the tall man himself. At number 9, we have Reggie. Reggie has acted well. He is funny, he looks silly, he is an ice cream man who portrays the role quite well. I don't feel that he is at his best here, or that the role is capable of providing him a chance to give his best. But with what he is given, he does a very good job. The later ass-kicking take-no-names, Rambo-esque, campy, cliched Ash, Bruce Campbell-type Reggie does not yet exist, and will take another movie to develop. But what we have is a strong supporting role, well fleshed out and played by Reggie Bannister. Scenes of him interacting with Mike from this film are used throughout the rest of the series, where they only gain in development and momentum, especially in Part 4, Oblivion, where many cut scenes from the original are reintroduced and used to develop the newer script, making Reggie's performance from 1, when considering the entire series, much more effective. But honestly, none of this should add weight into the valuation of his performance when reviewing Part 1 as a separate entity. And what we have in that light is a very good performance from one of the series' most iconic figures, albeit in this movie he has yet to become iconic. At 8, we have the Red Planet. The Red Planet is very well filmed and a very unique scene. While investigating the mausoleum, our heroes find the room where the noise is coming from. A large set of tuning forks in a constant hum are set across from stacks of people encased in drums by a wide expanse of white. Mike investigates and learns that the forks exist as a portal, a fork in reality, or a stargate. As Mike puts more and more of his arm into the portal, he is sucked in, where he witnesses the tall man's Red Planet and his army of slaves. Somehow this explains to Mike the tall man's agenda, at least somewhat, and on his return, after unsmoking, he explains. It is a very well filmed and iconic scene. Coming in at 7, we have the soundtrack. The original title song, of course, the iconic Phantasm theme, written by Fred Myrow, is almost as series-defining as The Tall Man, and I feel that it is most well used in the original film, even to the point of being reworked as a funk jam when they are hanging out in the bar. If you are a fan and hear the music, you will feel a sting of nostalgia and fear. The song is perfect for the movie, and is used in all the movies after. I do feel that it is used better in this film, as it is just so powerful there isn't a ton you can do to perfect it in the later films beyond beefing it up slightly or re-recording it with perhaps better equipment and players. Rearrangements and new instruments and equipment etc. can only go so far before it is the same song, and since the effects, acting, budget, everything was on a much smaller scale the first time around, while the song was able to shine completely, it feels much stronger in the original film. Reggie and Jody performed Sittin' Here at Midnight as a world premiere, and it works. It may feel a bit out of place at first, but it does work, as Jody plays rhythm on an electric guitar and Reggie manages to play lead on an acoustic quite well, before switching roles somewhat in the breakdown. Being that there is no studio touch-up, at least I don't think there was, this was a live jam. It was performed very well. They make it feel as if it was impromptu and spontaneous. And in doing so, they make it effective and it helps to develop the relationship of the characters. At number 6, we have Mike Pearson. Mike is a badass 13-year-old with an abandonment issue that does perhaps lend credit to none of this happening. He is perhaps making all of this up because he fears after his parents' death, Jody will leave him, which is explained in detail as Jody tells his thoughts to a friend and Mike listens on. Of course, the ending flat ruins this theory, which will be discussed later. As presented, Mike is an extremely resilient and smart young teen. When locked in his room, he makes a makeshift explosion, with a shotgun shell, a hammer, and some tape, MacGyver style. He manages to kill the tall man via car explosion, and when that doesn't work, with his brother's aid, he manages to trap the tall man in a mine shaft, effectively ending the plot arc of battle within the movie. And it is he who figures everything out, at least as much as they reveal in this film. Most of it is Mike's doing. Mike is the only one to fully enter and see the Red Planet, where he gets a decent grasp on the tall man's plans, and what we believe at the time to be the full explanation, and it is Mike who drives the plot, seeking answers and explanations to the mysteries of the tall-suited master of death. And in turn, the tall man has an infatuation or connection with Mike. As the film is confusing and dreamlike, it could very well be argued he is a figment of Mike's imagination, a creation or representation of loss. This would explain the tall man's infatuations and connection with Mike. These ideals will be very much further explored and further muddled in the later films, but a constant theme is the tall man's desire to obtain Mike. In the original film, it seems that he only wants to kill him, all the way from a detective spying on the tall man in the beginning to an active action hero battling and often defeating the malevolent entity. Mike is the main protagonist and hero and moves the story along, and Michael Baldwin does a great job portraying him. At number 5, we have the Sphere. The Sphere is a very unique and original idea, one that again becomes muddled with Star Wars. As said before, Coscarelli was not influenced by Star Wars, or so he claims, and I do believe him. The Sphere seems to serve as the tall man's ultimate weapon, a flying Cuisinart which when lodged in a victim's face drills a hole and drains them of their blood. According to lore, this scene gave the movie an X rating because the caretaker pees himself at the end. Ominous and deadly, full of mystery and a grander mythos which will be delved upon deeper in the later films. The spheres are one of, if not the most iconic feature of Phantasm. I believe the tall man is the ultimate Phantasm-defining character, but the spheres are what most people remember from these films, and they have certainly been a selling feature of the universe. In this film, we have a beautifully and well-shot sentinel that stalks the hallways of the Morningside Mausoleum, searching for those that would dare to enter the tall man's domain and cause any trouble to his grand narrative. This is easily the best of the special effects and was done very convincingly. For a budget of $300,000, I applaud Coscarelli's use of special effects, and among them, this shines as the best. At number 4, we have the imagery. The imagery is amazing, and I believe this is the true reason the film resonates so deeply with audiences from its release to today. Dark and horrifyingly original jump scares lure around every corner, set up and filmed in such a way that they define themselves amongst the genre as unique and pure, even to this day. The tall man is such an ominously horrifying entity, and his placement in these scenes is perfect. This imagery perhaps comes to its climax in the ending, which leads us directly to number 3. At number 3, we have the ending. As Mike awakens to what we may finally believe is reality, we learn that Jody died before the movie even began. Everything that has happened has been a dream. Thus the tall man and the ideas that he represented some dark fear in Mike's head return and seem to be fulfilled. Reggie, in probably his best acted scene, which is great because it is used frequently throughout the rest of the films as montage and memory footage, explains what is now seemingly reality to Mike. Jody died in a car wreck. Before this, Mike's parents died. There is no tall man. Reggie is sworn to protect Mike, and he holds this vow true for the next 4 films. Reggie knows he will never take Jody's place, but he's sure as hell gonna try. He then proposes a road trip to Mike, in what I assume was not thought of at the time, but becomes an amazing foreshadowing for the rest of the movies, as the characters more or less live the rest of their Phantasm lives involved in search and destroy road trips. Mike agrees and goes upstairs to pack his things. When he shuts his closet door, the mirror reflects upon the tall man. In an instant, everything is again real. The tall man is real. Whatever has happened, be it in reality or not, has directed the tall man to come and take Mike. It is truly scary and remains as one of the best filmed horror scenes of all time. As Mike turns to witness the tall man, he emits the classic line. As the mirror breaks, Mike is nabbed from behind with a great growl and an amazing jump scare, immediately ending the film. Some people, of course, will be put off with such an ending. All of a sudden, everything's a dream, and he gotcha. But the entire film may or may not have been a dream. None of what we have seen most likely happened. All we truly know is Mike has been taken by the all-too-real tall man. This exists and will continue to exist as one of the all-time classic and best horror endings ever. Coming in at number 2, we have the tall man himself. Many fans will be mad, and rightly so, that the tall man is not at number 1.
Lawrence Rory Guy.
a liner writer for musical albums. He achieved a Grammy and various nominations for his work. He began acting around the age of 46, and I believe his first role was in Coscarelli's early work, Jim the World's Greatest. He assumed the name of Angus Scrimm, a much more sinister and fitting name, especially when considering the dark roles he would be typecast in, and seemingly very much enjoyed throughout his acting career. He of course achieved cult horror super status, portraying the main antagonist, the dark and malevolent, calm and rational, unstoppable and unwielding tall man. A creature of unknown origin, although we are led to assume he comes from the Red Planet, at least in this film. It is he who somehow rules over his subjects and leads his dark forces to conquer Mike's town, for reasons not fully explored or explained beyond the creation of slaves to ship to the Red Planet. His abilities in this film seem limited to controlling his minions, vast super strength, appendages that come to life when removed, resurrecting the dead, perhaps mind control when viewing the caretaker. He doesn't seem normal at the least, and his seemingly incurable immortality, as evidenced by Mike in the old photo showing him alive in centuries past. He represents the dark, sinister aspects of time and Chronos, or Saturn, aka the Grim Reaper. With the ability to resurrect the dead, he may well be a god, and definitely seems to hold a godlike or demi-god-like status, as literally nothing can keep him down. His influence is quite noteworthy even to this day. The modern tulpa known as Slender Man was directly influenced by the Tall Man. The original appearance was literally a hacked photo of the Tall Man's body with Slender Man's head on top. Angus Scrimm stuck with the Tall Man character to the end, dying shortly after the filming of Part 5, showing an unbelievable level of commitment to the role. His abilities to portray the Tall Man were almost uncanny in scope, although I feel he doesn't fully come into his own until Part 2 and 3, where his chops and familiarity with the character have been allowed to age and develop, as well as his own aging adding a dark and menacing touch to the character. He looked truly horrifying in later incarnations. Here he accurately, convincingly, and masterfully plays the character of the Tall Man, making him feel quite real and understandable, all the while being completely mysterious and quite impossible to understand. We may not fully understand his motives, but we believe he fully intends to do whatever it takes to fulfill his ultimate plans. His dialogue and execution is nearly perfect, and I would believe it to be perfect if he did not surpass it in later films. The iconic "boy" line pulls a sting of fear and nostalgia from every Phantasm fan, and is a truly horrific moment. It is very hard not to put Angus Scrimm at number 1, and if this was a later installment, he would likely beat number 1. As time moved on, Scrimm's dark depiction of this entity simply shined brighter and brighter. Some weaknesses in the film include the Lady in Lavender. She is not altogether interesting in any way, and she practically opens the movie, and she is the Tall Man, or she turns into the Tall Man. It is never fully explained, and it continues to happen throughout the later films that women are or work for the Tall Man and infiltrate their way into Reggie's grasp. I never find it to be an extremely strong point, having the Tall Man infiltrate as a woman to stab or kill, and then become the Tall Man. It's almost like they just used her to show some breasts in the beginning of the film. I know many fans love the Lady in Lavender, and she was returned with no explanation again in Phantasm 5 as a nod to the fans. Whereas I am a fan, and I don't want or need this nod. The Tall Man is epic, and these weird transformations into women are not. They weaken his presence. Luckily this rarely happens, and I can chalk it all up to being a dream. Another weakness in my opinion is the fortune teller. Perhaps I am missing some huge and obvious plot point. Yet again, she is a strange and undeveloped character that returns throughout the series. Either way, she is never fully explored or explained and remains as a mystery that, in my opinion, just muddles the waters. And if she has to exist, I want to know more about her. Which brings us directly to the plot, which rightly takes its spot at number 1. The plot is dark, mysterious, confusing, beyond original, and truly epic in scope and delivery. With a budget of $300,000, this is quite truly a work of genius. It delves into a lost, almost Lynchian-esque dream world, and like others before, delves in and out of dreams without necessarily telling us it has done so. I do not believe it delves as geniusly into these worlds as directors such as Kubrick and Lynch have arguably done, and the narratives we are given, although complex and difficult to decipher and realize for the layman, are exactly those presented. It is what it appears to be, a coming-of-age tale with an altogether unstoppable tyrant, intent on killing everyone and everything. It is perhaps the most original horror film of all time, an amazing story that is executed well beyond the limitations of a $300,000 budget, filming that is beautiful, wide, and epic. Coscarelli is truly talented and masterful at setting up and filming his scenes. This movie does not feel like it was made for $300,000 by friends and passionate, devoted musicians and the like. It feels like it is so much more, because of the twistedly original plot and the execution thereof, as well as the talented and unique performances of the lead actors. Phantasm lives on in the memory of Phantasm fans as one of, if not the best film in the series, and is remembered and loved by a horde of people on its own. This is easily the most successful film in the franchise and played the drive-in circuit, where it scared the hell out of the average non-genre going person. It was tested, and upon testing became an instant hit, one that remains as relevant to the history of horror and the development of the genres it tested and perfected as it ever was. The jump scares are on par with and better than the countless imitations they influenced. And the tall man lives on as one of the most iconic horror figures of all time. I recommend this movie to anyone that can enjoy a narrative that is not concrete, linear, mapped out, and entirely spelled out for you, as well as someone who loves camp and strange wacky horror. The ideas explored and introduced are simply too unique and great to be ignored. If you enjoy scary and the jump scare genre, it is also worth giving this a try, as it is one of the great innovators in that realm. If you are a horror fan and have not seen Phantasm, you owe it to yourself to go and watch one of the best films in the genre. One that's innovations and creativity has been copied countless times throughout the decades, and whose influence has remained solid throughout the world of horror to this day. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Please like, share, and subscribe. It is truly the only way I can grow and helps me a great deal. And I will be back with more reviews.